The gunslinger's shadow fell across her like a grave marker, his hand resting on the revolver that had ended 7 lives, and he smiled when he told her to leave town by sundown or become the 8th. Before we dive into the story, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. Also, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more incredible stories tomorrow. Now, let's continue with the story. Emma Hartwell felt every stare on Dust Creek's main street when Cole Mackenzie stepped into her path outside the general store. He carried his reputation the way other men carried pistols. Easy, visible, dangerous. Tall and lean, eyes the color of dirty ice, he was a legend shaped by gunpowder and blood. The stories always ended the same way. 3 seconds, instance. One man left standing. "You're making a mistake," Emma said quietly, her voice steady even as the sack of flour trembled in her arms. She'd stepped off the stagecoach less than 2 hours ago, her travel dress still dust-streaked from 3 brutal days on the road. A mail-order bride from Philadelphia, the papers claimed. A woman chasing a clean start in a land where questions weren't asked and pasts stayed buried. Cole laughed, short, sharp, and cruel. "The only mistake here is you, sweetheart. A pretty thing like you doesn't belong to a monster like Augustus Dalton." He leaned in close enough for her to smell whiskey and stale tobacco. "I'm doing you a favor. Take the next stage east and forget you ever heard that devil's name." The street had gone silent. Even the horses seemed to hold their breath. Emma met Cole's stare without flinching, something flickering behind her calm expression that made him pause for just a heartbeat. "You don't know who you're threatening," she said softly. Cole's hand drifted toward his gun, a casual gesture that had preceded a dozen corpses. "I know exactly who I'm threatening. Some desperate woman fool enough to answer an ad from the Reaper himself." He spat in the dust. "Augustus Dalton might scare the sheep in this territory, but I ain't no sheep." Emma adjusted the flour sack, her movements deliberate and unhurried. "No, you're not." Her gaze shifted past his shoulder to something in the distance. "You're the man who just signed his own death warrant." Cole started to turn, but there was nothing behind him except empty street and afternoon shadows. When he looked back, Emma was already walking away, her spine straight and her steps measured. Something about the way she moved, the absolute absence of fear, sent a cold thread through his gut that whiskey couldn't warm. From the 2nd floor of the hotel across the street, a figure stepped back from the window. The watcher had seen everything, and a message would need to be sent. The Reaper would want to know that someone had threatened what was his. By sunset, the whole territory would be holding its breath. The Dalton Ranch rose from the prairie like a fortress meant for war rather than cattle. Black timber gates banded in iron, guard towers positioned to command the horizon, rifle barrels catching the dying light. Emma's wagon rolled through the entrance as ranch hands scattered, eyes down, moving fast. Augustus Dalton waited on the porch. 50 years carved into him by scars and ruthless decisions. Gray threaded through black hair pulled back with military precision. Fine leather coat, boots polished to a mirror sheen. But it was his eyes that stopped Emma cold. Steel frozen over, eyes that had watched men plead and offered nothing in return. "Emma Hartwell." His voice wasn't a question. It was a verdict. "Mr. Dalton." She climbed down without waiting for help, spine straight, chin high. He studied her like a commander sizing up a new unit. Her posture, her hands, the absence of fear most people wore like armor around him. At last, he nodded once. "Did anyone trouble you in town?" The question landed soft, but carried weight. Emma thought of Cole Mackenzie, his whiskey breath and casual violence. A gunslinger named Cole Mackenzie. He suggested I take the next stage east. Something flickered across Augustus's face, gone before Emma could name it. He turned and walked into the house without another word, and she understood this was an invitation. Inside, the ranch house was austere, functional. No decoration, no warmth. A place where a man lived but didn't want to be reminded he was alive. Sit. Augustus poured 2 glasses of whiskey, neat. He handed her one, and she took it without hesitation. They drank in silence, and Emma felt the test in it. He was waiting for her to fill the quiet with nervous chatter, to ask questions, to show weakness. She gave him nothing. Cole Mackenzie is a dead man, Augustus said finally. He just doesn't know it yet. The certainty in his voice chilled her more than any threat. This wasn't anger or wounded pride. It was simple fact, delivered the way another man might comment on weather. That night, Emma lay in a guest room that felt more like a cell, listening to the house settle around her. Through the thin walls, she heard the staff whispering. A maid named Clara spoke in hushed tones about the reaper's past, about a rustler who'd stolen 3 head of cattle and been tracked for 90 days across 2 territories. Augustus had brought the man back alive, made him work the ranch for a year to pay his debt, then shot him on the final day anyway. It's the principle, Clara whispered. Mr. Dalton don't forgive, and he don't forget. Another voice joined in, talking about the Henderson settlement, how Augustus had burned it to ash over a single stolen horse. 23 families left with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a warning. The Reaper's justice had no mercy clause. Emma stared at the ceiling and wondered what kind of man she'd agreed to marry. More importantly, she wondered what he'd do when he discovered she wasn't the helpless bride he'd sent for. By the following noon, Dust Creek buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. Cole Mackenzie had threatened Augustus Dalton's bride. The tale raced through saloons and storefronts, each retelling darker than the last. Cole was already dead, people said. A walking corpse. If he was lucky, he had 3 days left. Sheriff Pike found Cole at the Silver Dollar, nursing whiskey that did nothing to steady his hands. Pike was a man who wore a badge like a disguise, a coward who'd learned survival meant staying well clear of the Reaper. You need to apologize and ride out, Pike said, voice shaking. Now. Today. Cole slammed his glass down hard enough to crack it. I'm the fastest draw in this territory. I've killed men who thought they were untouchable. His hand drifted to his revolver, pride and instinct intertwined. Some old rancher's reputation doesn't scare me. Then you're a fool. Pike backed toward the door. Dalton once hunted a man through 3 states to collect a debt of honor. Burned an entire settlement over a horse. What do you think he'll do over his woman? But Cole couldn't back down. Reputation was currency out here, and running from Augustus would make him worthless. Every 2-bit gunslinger in the territory would come looking to prove themselves against the man who'd fled the Reaper. He'd be dead within a month anyway, shot in the back by some kid trying to make a name. Better to stand and fight. He gathered his crew at the saloon, 3 men who'd ridden with him long enough to be stupid together. Frank, a knife fighter from Louisiana. Davis, who could shoot the wings off a fly at 50 yards. Young Tommy, barely 20 but mean enough to count. We fortify here, Cole said, mapping it out on the bar top with spilled whiskey. Augustus comes for me. We ambush him. 4 guns against 1 old man. The logic felt solid through the alcohol haze. They barricaded the doors, positioned themselves at windows overlooking the street, rifles loaded, revolvers checked and rechecked. The afternoon sun crawled across the floorboards while they waited, tension winding tighter with each passing minute. Maybe he won't come, Tommy said, his voice cracking young. Frank laughed without humor. He'll come. Question is how. The saloon grew quieter as other patrons slipped out through the back, wanting no part of what was brewing. By sunset, Cole and his men were alone in the building, armed to the teeth and watching the street through gaps in the boarded windows. That's when Cole's hands started shaking. Not from fear, he told himself, from anticipation. But deep in his gut, where whiskey couldn't reach, a cold certainty was taking root. He'd made a mistake, the kind that didn't offer second chances. The street outside remained empty as darkness fell, but Cole could feel eyes watching from every shadow. The Reaper knew where he was. The Reaper was coming. The only question was when. The rider arrived at dusk, a single silhouette against a sky that as spilled blood. Not Augustus Dalton. Worse. Nathaniel Cross dismounted outside the Silver Dollar with the easy grace of a man who'd walked into 100 traps and walked out of all of them. Former Pinkerton, Dalton's right hand, his instrument. Where Dalton was cold fury, Nathaniel was precision, black-clad, calculating, a scalpel where others swung hammers. He shattered the barricaded doors with one kick and walked in unarmed, unhurried. Cole's men raised their guns, tracking him, but Nathaniel moved straight to the bar. Whiskey, he said to the empty room. He poured it himself, neat, and drank slowly while 4 barrels followed him. You've got nerve, Cole said, finger resting on the trigger. Something about Nathaniel's indifference made him hesitate. Nathaniel turned, leaning against the bar like he was discussing the weather. Mr. Dalton sends his regards. He says you have until dawn. Take your men. Take your horses. Ride until these mountains disappear. And if I don't? Cole's voice carried more bravado than conviction. Then you'll face consequences that would make death look like a kindness. Nathaniel's tone never changed, still conversational, still calm. He'll break every bone in your hands so you can never hold a gun again. He'll brand you a coward and let you live with it. He'll make sure every person in 3 territories knows Cole Mackenzie begged for mercy and didn't get it. The temperature in the saloon seemed to drop 10 degrees. Frank stepped forward, knife already in hand. Big words from one unarmed man. I'm not here to fight, Nathaniel said. I'm here to deliver a message. Whether you're smart enough to listen is your concern, not mine. Cole felt his crew looking at him, waiting for orders. His pride screamed at him to pull the trigger, to show this messenger what happened to men who threatened Cole Mackenzie. But his instincts, the same ones that had kept him alive through a dozen gunfights, were screaming something different. This was a test. Augustus wanted to see if Cole was stupid enough to kill an unarmed messenger. Cole spat at Nathaniel's feet instead, the insult deliberate. Tell your boss I'll be here at dawn. If he wants me gone, he can come do it himself. Nathaniel smiled, the expression cold enough to freeze blood. Mr. Dalton thought you'd say that. He set down his glass with a soft click that sounded like a coffin closing. He'll be disappointed he was right. He walked out the same way he came in, through the shattered door, climbing onto his horse with movements smooth as silk. The last thing Cole saw was Nathaniel's back disappearing into darkness, and somehow that felt worse than any threat could have been. The saloon erupted in nervous whispers the moment he was gone, but Cole's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Augustus found Emma in the stables at dawn, inspecting a rifle with a familiarity that made his eyes narrow. She didn't flinch when his shadow fell over her. She checked the action like it was second nature. We need to talk, he said. They went to his study. A room ruled by maps and ledgers, the machinery of an empire built on cattle and calculated violence. He poured coffee, black and strong, then sat across from her, letting silence do its work. Emma spoke first. I wasn't entirely honest in my letters. He waited. My father was Captain James Hartwell, Union officer. She stared into her cup. Court-martialed for refusing an order that would have slaughtered his men. They stripped his rank, ruined his name. Her jaw tightened. After that, we traveled with a Wild West show. He taught me to shoot before I could read properly. Augustus's gaze sharpened. A sharpshooter. Not a question. Top billing for 3 years. I could hit a playing card at 100 yards, shoot glass balls out of the air, put 6 rounds through a silver dollar. The pride in her voice was unmistakable. Then a politician in Philadelphia took interest in the show. Senator Whitmore. He wanted me for his private collection. Thought I'd be a pretty trophy. Augustus's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air. I humiliated him in front of 200 people, shot his hat off his head when he wouldn't take no for an answer, told everyone exactly what kind of man he was. Emma's smile held no warmth. His friends made sure I'd never work again, made sure anyone who hired me would regret it. So I came west where names don't matter, and the past stays buried. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken calculations. Finally, Augustus stood and retrieved a Winchester from the gun cabinet, checking it was loaded before handing it to her. Show me. Outside, he set up 6 bottles on a fence rail 50 yards out. Emma worked the lever action once, testing the weight and balance. Then she fired, smooth and fast, barely seeming to aim. 6 shots, 6 explosions of glass, the sequence taking less than 10 seconds. Augustus studied her with new eyes, seeing past the travel-worn dress and proper manners to the steel underneath. Can you kill a man? If I have to, you'll have to. He started walking back toward the house. Cole Mackenzie isn't the only threat out here. This territory is full of men who see weakness and exploit it. If you're going to be my wife, you need to be more than decorative. Emma followed, the rifle still in her hands. What are you really asking me? Augustus stopped at the porch, turning to face her directly. I'm dying. Cancer, the doctor says. Maybe a year if I'm lucky. His voice carried no self-pity, just fact. I didn't send for a bride. I sent for an heir. Someone strong enough to hold what I've built when I'm gone. The weight of that admission settled over Emma like a mantle. This wasn't a marriage. It was a transfer of power. Then you'd better teach me everything, she said. Cole made his decision at 3 in the morning, fueled by whiskey and the desperate logic of a cornered animal. Waiting for dawn meant waiting to die. Better to strike first, catch Augustus sleeping, end this before the Reaper could mobilize his full force. We ride now, he told his men. Hit the ranch. Finish this quick. They left Dust Creek under cover of darkness. 4 riders moving fast through territory that seemed to hold its breath. The Dalton Ranch sat 5 miles out, and Cole's plan was simple. Get in, kill Augustus, get out before anyone knew what happened. Clean and surgical. The first sign something was wrong came when they crossed the property line. Frank's horse screamed and went down, leg shattered in a trap hidden in the tall grass. Before anyone could react, the night exploded with muzzle flash from 3 directions. Davis took a round through the chest and toppled backward, dead before he hit ground. Tommy's horse bolted, carrying him into darkness while he screamed. Cole dove from his saddle as bullets chewed up the earth where he'd been. He crawled through grass, slick with dew and Frank's blood, his mind trying to process what was happening. The ranch was a fortress. Every approach was covered, every angle calculated. Augustus had turned his own property into a killing field. Rifle fire came from the guard towers, from hidden positions in the rocks, from places Cole couldn't even see. This wasn't a fight. It was an execution, and he was the target. He made it to a dry creek bed, pressing himself flat while Lead screamed overhead. Through the chaos, he could hear Frank gurgling somewhere in the darkness, drowning in his own blood. Tommy's screams had stopped. Cole was alone, pinned down, and the sky was starting to lighten. That's when the shooting stopped. The silence was worse. Cole lay there, breathing hard, waiting for the final bullet. Instead, a voice called out from the darkness, calm and measured. "Mr. Mackenzie." It was Nathaniel Cross. "You can leave now. Crawl back to town and we'll let you live long enough to pack your things." Cole's pride screamed at him to fight, to go down shooting like a man. But his survival instinct was stronger. He scrambled out of the creek bed and ran, stumbling over rocks and grass, leaving his gun behind, leaving Frank dying in the dirt. He didn't stop until he reached his horse a quarter-mile back, still tied where they'd left the animals. He rode into Dust Creek as the sun rose, covered in dirt and blood that wasn't his. The main street was already awake, and people stopped to stare at the great Cole Mackenzie, broken and bleeding, his crew dead behind him. By noon, the bodies of Frank and Davis were laid out in front of the general store, a note pinned to Frank's chest in handwriting as neat as a ledger entry. "This is mercy." Cole sat in the silver dollar, shaking so hard he couldn't hold his glass, and understood with absolute clarity that Augustus Dalton hadn't even left his house. 3 days after Cole's failed attack, Augustus took Emma to the northern edge of his property, where the land turned wild and rock. A group of rustlers had been bleeding his herd for weeks, taking cattle in 2s and 3s, careful enough to avoid notice, but bold enough to keep coming back. "They'll be here today," Augustus said, handing her a rifle. "They always come on Thursdays when the main crew is occupied elsewhere." Emma checked the weapon, finding it clean and well-maintained. "What do you want me to do?" "Prove you belong here." He gestured to a ridge overlooking a narrow canyon where stolen cattle would have to pass. "My men are watching. They need to see you're not just the boss's decorative wife. They need to fear you the way they fear me." She climbed to the position alone, settling into the rocks with the patience her father had taught her. "Wait for the shot. Don't force it. Let the moment come to you." Below, the canyon stretched empty and quiet, but Emma could read the signs. Fresh tracks in the dust. Bent grass where men had scouted earlier. They were coming. The rustlers appeared just after noon, 3 of them driving 8 head of cattle toward the territorial line. They moved casual and confident, men who'd done this enough times to feel safe. Emma let them get halfway through the canyon before she took her first shot. The lead rustler dropped from his saddle, the crack of the rifle echoing off stone walls. The other 2 went for their guns, but Emma was faster, working the lever action smooth as breathing. Second shot took the man on the left through the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. The third rustler tried to run, but his horse reared, and Emma's final bullet caught him clean, dropping him into the dirt. 3 shots, 3 bodies, maybe 15 seconds total. She descended from the ridge to find Augustus and 5 ranch hands standing at the canyon entrance, having watched everything. The men stared at her with something new in their eyes, no longer seeing the mail-order bride from Philadelphia. Emma walked past the bodies without looking down, handing the rifle back to Augustus. "They won't be coming back," she said. One of the ranch hands, a grizzled veteran named Jackson, actually tipped his hat to her. "Mom." That night in the bunkhouse, the story spread like wildfire. The boss's woman could shoot. Not just shoot, but kill clean and cold. No hesitation, no mercy. She'd stood on that ridge like death itself and delivered judgment without blinking. Augustus found her on the porch after dark, staring at the stars. He didn't ask if she was troubled by what she'd done. Instead, he sat beside her and said, "Tomorrow I start teaching you how to run the business side. Ledgers, contracts, which buyers to trust and which ones need watching." Emma understood what he wasn't saying. The violence was just the beginning. The real test was building something that would last after both of them were gone. "I'm ready," she said, and meant it. Cole spent a week watching his reputation crumble like dry bread. The whispers followed him everywhere, eyes tracking his movements with contempt instead of fear. The man who'd run from the Reaper, the coward who'd left his crew to die. Every two-bit gunslinger in the territory now looked at him like prey. He couldn't leave. Running would confirm everything they said about him, and he'd spend the rest of his short life looking over his shoulder. But staying meant slow death by 1,000 cuts, each day chipping away another piece of the legend he'd built. There was only one move left, the kind of desperate play that either saved everything or ended it quick. He'd take Emma Hartwell hostage, use her to force Augustus into a face-to-face confrontation. One fair fight, winner takes all. It was insane, but insane was all he had left. He found 2 drifters at a card game, men hungry enough to take gold over good sense. Luther, a scarred brute from Texas. Pike Jr., the sheriff's worthless nephew looking to prove himself. Cole promised them $500 each, knowing he'd probably never have to pay. "She goes to town every Thursday for supplies," Cole explained, spreading his plan across a whiskey-stained table. "We take her on the road between town and the ranch. Quick and clean." What Cole didn't know was that Emma never traveled alone anymore. What he didn't know was that Nathaniel Cross had men positioned throughout Dust Creek, watching and waiting. What he didn't know was that Augustus had anticipated this exact move, counted on Cole's desperation to make him stupid. They positioned themselves 2 miles outside town where the road curved through a stand of cottonwoods. Perfect ambush point, good cover, easy escape routes. Cole checked his revolver for the 100th time, trying to steady his hands. The wagon appeared right on schedule, Emma driving with supplies stacked in the back. She looked small and vulnerable, exactly the target Cole needed her to be. He stepped into the road, gun raised. "Stop the wagon, Mrs. Dalton." Emma pulled the reins, her face calm. Too calm. That should have been his first warning. Luther and Pike Jr. moved in from the sides, blocking any escape. Cole kept his weapon trained on Emma's chest. "You're coming with us. Tell your husband if he wants you back. He meets me tomorrow at noon. Just him and me. No tricks." Emma's hands moved under the wagon seat, emerging with a sawed-off shotgun that seemed to appear from nowhere. The twin barrels looked enormous from Cole's perspective, black holes that promised oblivion. "You made a mistake," she said quietly. That's when Nathaniel Cross stepped out from behind the cottonwoods, rifle already aimed. 3 ranch hands materialized from positions Cole hadn't even considered, surrounding them with practiced precision. They'd walked straight into a trap, and Cole understood with sick certainty that Augustus had known, had planned for this, had used Emma as bait. His desperation had made him predictable, and predictable men died easy. The moment stretched like pulled wire, every man frozen in a tableau of violence waiting to happen. Cole's gun was still pointed at Emma, but his eyes were on Nathaniel's rifle, calculating odds that didn't exist. Luther and Pike Jr. had their hands halfway to their weapons when Emma's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Drop your guns and run, or die here in the dirt." It wasn't a threat. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered in the same tone someone might use to comment on weather. Luther was smart enough to read the room. He dropped his pistol and bolted into the trees, crashing through brush like a spooked deer. Pike Jr. followed half a second later, leaving Cole alone in the middle of the road. "You don't have to do this," Cole said, hating how his voice shook. "I'll leave. You'll never see me again." Emma tilted her head, studying him the way someone might examine an insect. "You threatened me. You tried to kidnap me. You thought I was weak because I'm a woman." The shotgun never wavered. "But mostly, you disrespected my husband. That I can't forgive. Your husband's not even here." Cole spat, rage and fear mixing into something toxic. "Hiding behind a woman. Some reaper he turned out to be." "He doesn't need to be here," Emma said. "I'm here, and I'm enough." Cole's hand moved toward his gun, muscle memory overriding survival instinct. Pride wouldn't let him surrender to a woman, wouldn't let him live knowing she'd beaten him. Better to die fast than slow. His fingers touched the grip. The shotgun roared. Cole Mackenzie, the fastest draw in the territory, the man who'd killed 7 others in fair fights, never cleared leather. The blast caught him center mass and threw him backward into the dust, his unfired revolver falling from nerveless fingers. He tried to breathe, but his lungs wouldn't work. Tried to speak, but blood filled his mouth. Emma stood over him, the shotgun smoking in her hands. Her face showed nothing. No satisfaction, no remorse, just cold calculation, like she'd solved a problem that needed solving. "You should have left when you had the chance," she said. Cole's vision tunneled to black around the edges. His last thought was bitter and useless, the recognition that he'd never stood a chance. Not against Augustus, not against Emma. He'd been a dead man walking from the moment he'd opened his mouth outside that general store. Emma calmly broke open the shotgun and reloaded while Nathaniel and the ranch hands secured the scene. She climbed back onto the wagon, sitting straight-backed and composed, like she hadn't just killed a man in the middle of the road. "Tie his body to the back," she told Nathaniel. "I'm taking him home. Augustus will want to see that it's finished." The wagon rolled toward the Dalton ranch with Cole's corpse dragging behind, leaving a trail of dust and blood that told everyone in the territory exactly what happened when you threatened the Reaper's wife. Augustus was waiting on the porch when Emma's wagon rolled through the gates, Cole's body trailing behind like a warning written in flesh and blood. He watched her climb down, shotgun still in hand, her dress dusty, but her spine straight. For the first time since they'd met, something close to pride flickered across his face. "It's done," Emma said simply. Augustus nodded once. "Good." He gestured to the ranch hands. "Display the body at the property line. Anyone who wants to know what happens when you threaten the Daltons can see for themselves." Over the following months, Augustus taught Emma everything. How to read a cattle ledger and spot when a buyer was trying to cheat. Which ranch hands were loyal and which needed watching. How to command respect through measured violence rather than chaos. The difference between justice and revenge, and when each was appropriate. He showed her the network of contacts that stretched across 3 territories, the politicians who owed him favors, the lawmen who looked the other way for the right price. He taught her that power wasn't about being the fastest gun. It was about being the most prepared, the most patient, the most willing to do what needed doing. "Fear is a tool," he told her one evening as they reviewed contracts. "But loyalty is better. Give your people reason to follow you beyond terror, and you'll build something that lasts." The cancer took him slowly, eating away at the Iron Man piece by piece. But Augustus faced death the same way he'd faced everything else, with cold acceptance and careful planning. His final words to Emma were instructions, not sentiment. "Don't apologize for being hard. This territory respects strength, not kindness. Be the reaper they need, not the woman they expect." When Augustus Dalton died on a cold morning in February, the entire territory held its breath. Vultures circled immediately, rival ranchers and ambitious gunslingers, thinking the Dalton Empire would crumble without its foundation. They came testing, probing for weakness. They found Emma instead. She met the first challenger in the main street of Dust Creek, a hotshot from Colorado who thought a woman couldn't possibly fill Augustus's boots. Emma gave him the same choice she'd given Cole Mackenzie. He chose poorly. She shot him before his gun cleared the holster, then walked away without looking back. After that, the challenges stopped. Within a year, Emma Dalton controlled more land and cattle than Augustus ever had. She ruled with the same calculated precision, the same willingness to do violence when necessary, but with something Augustus had never possessed: the ability to build alliances instead of just burning enemies. The territory learned to fear her, yes, but they also learned to respect her. And when people spoke of the Reaper now, they meant the widow, not the man. Emma Hartwell had arrived as a mail order, bride running from scandal. She became Emma Dalton, the most dangerous rancher in the West, and legends spread like wildfire about the woman who'd killed the infamous Cole Mackenzie in the middle of the road without breaking a sweat. She never remarried, never softened, never apologized for what she'd become. And when young gunslingers asked old-timers about the stories, they'd shake their heads and say the same thing. The Reaper's widow is deadlier than the man himself. Don't test her unless you're ready to die. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have an even more incredible tale of survival and redemption waiting for you. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when a condemned outlaw gets one final chance at salvation.